Hey, this is Chris Franco, and you are listening to Compound Money Quietly, the CMQ Investing Podcast. CMQ investors, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. This is something that has been requested of me, and that is people want me to give my hot take on Jack Dorsey stepping down as the CEO of Twitter. Now, this is what I'm about to share with you. While it is a current event, I have found what I would consider to be an enduring lesson that we can all take with us and apply moving forward, whether it's today, tomorrow, or 10 years down the road. And that lesson is the importance of knowing and really understanding the ins and outs of who is running the company. Warren Buffett once said, and I quote, "It's hard to overemphasize the importance of who is CEO of a company." Now, for the purpose of this episode, I would say that Jack Dorsey was just not a good CEO of Twitter. It's not an attack on him personally. I think he's a really interesting, cool person who's going to go on and do a lot of really interesting things in the future. But let me explain why I think this was long overdue. So, as I said, Jack Dorsey has stepped down, he stepped aside, or he, as I eloquently put it, he got the hell out of the way. What Jack Dorsey, or what my issues with him from the get-go, and why I would never have invested in Twitter, even if this was the only issue, meaning even if him being the CEO was the only issue, it's because if the CEO is an issue, it's an issue. So reason number one, he was a part-time CEO. So for those of you who don't know this, Jack Dorsey was the CEO of Twitter, I guess until yesterday, and also the CEO of Square, which he still is. So if you're the CEO of two different companies, you are a part-time CEO of both. And I say that not because I think it's that huge of a revelation, but it's probably the most critical piece of information. As someone who owns a business, runs a business, while it's not a publicly traded business, and I'm sure what Dorsey was dealing with was even, much more hectic than what I'm dealing with, but it's a lot to deal with. I don't care who you are. And so this idea, this notion of, being the CEO of two businesses, it's just asinine. It's not feasible. It doesn't make any sense to anyone who knows anything about running a business. And beyond the fact of how, this might affect morale, if the CEO is only there half the time, it's just the nature of, I think, these kind of roles is you need someone who's thinking about the company and how to create value for shareholders constantly. And so if you're Jack Dorsey and you're the CEO of two different companies, you can't do that. Your brain is not focused on one. And I think that makes a difference. I don't think there are certain people who can do more than others in terms of what they can take on, but this is an area where it just doesn't agree with reality. You cannot be a great CEO of two different companies. If you're the CEO of two different companies, you are the part-time CEO of both companies. And I think a part-time CEO almost always gets beaten by a full-time CEO. So that's my number one reason is his lack of commitment, as illustrated by what I just described. Now, speaking of lack of commitment and what I would even describe as a lack of judgment, it goes to my next point. I don't trust Jack Dorsey's judgment as CEO of Twitter. I just have not had any reason to really say, wow, that was a great decision. A few different things. The first are a little bit superficial, but let's just deal with reality as I see it. The way that he would dress up or not dress up when he would be called in front of Congress. He's got the giant beard, the nose ring. I vaguely remember him wearing a tie-dyed shirt. And I think that's something where, you say what you want about Mark Zuckerberg, but when it came time to, be a big boy, he puts on the Armani suit and he shows up ready to perform, or, not perform like he's acting. I mean, perform as in he's there to be an adult, to deal with Congress, and to, frankly, he's aware of who he's talking to. He plays to his audience. And I think that's an important thing that you want to see in the CEO of a publicly traded company. When Jack Dorsey would, have his, whatever they're called, subpoenaed, or I don't know what the jargon is, but when he'd be called to testify to Congress, it's not that what he was saying was, immature or just, not smart, but it didn't matter because he just came across like, he didn't get it. And I think that's more of a Jack Dorsey thing than anything. Speaking of judgment, and again, I'm not judging, but Jack Dorsey has been I think gone on the record and says that he is in favor and does do something called microdosing of LSD. That's something, to me, that's a huge red flag, because again, you're just off doing experiments with your brain, all the while shareholders are looking for you to create value. They're looking to see, they want shareholder value, and you're busy, like I said, doing an experiment on your brain, trying something that's, outside of the box, which I'm not against, but come on, microdosing LSD, like I think that probably has some kinks to get worked out still. There are also reports that Jack Dorsey is known for what says here a brutal morning and evening routine that involves ice baths, all-day fasting, meditation, and a 5-mile walk into work. I'm all for the work-life balance, the exercise, all that good stuff. But, back in the early days of Twitter, one of the reasons he was allegedly fired was because he would leave work early to go to yoga classes. I think that's just something where we're talking about the CEO of a publicly traded company. People are looking for you to play a certain part. And I don't think anyone's above that in terms of the perception. Now, this isn't a game of perception, though. This is about results. If what Jack Dorsey was doing in terms of his daily wellness habits, if that was yielding great results, I'd have no problem with it. But the fact is, if we're just being objective here, Twitter's results have sucked. I wish I had a more eloquent, sophisticated way to describe that. But all you have to do is crack open a couple years worth of their 10Ks, and you can see it for yourself. Bloomberg reported in their coverage of Dorsey stepping down that in the era that Twitter was run by Jack Dorsey, there was one of the biggest rallies for U.S. tech stocks. Twitter pretty much missed out on it entirely. We can go down the list here. There's been not reports, but there are in four out of the last 5 quarters, Twitter's user growth actually decelerated. That doesn't bode well for them, especially regarding what I'm going to tell you next. Twitter is in the digital advertising. I'll even make it a little more specific. The social media advertising business. That's how Twitter generates the majority of its revenues. They are a long distant, I think second, maybe third place. And I say long distant, meaning they are well behind the number one player, which is Facebook. Before we got going live here, I told everyone on the live stream, I have some data in front of me. In 2020, Facebook's advertising revenue was about $84.2 billion. Twitter, on the other hand, brought in $3.2 billion in advertising revenue. So they're not even in the same, it's not even like the same ballpark. They're not even in the same jurisdiction, the same county, the same state, maybe not even the same country. So Twitter is just eating Facebook's crumbs as is. So what Twitter would need to do to actually, start to really make a mark there, well, it's not I'd say, I'll put it this way. It's not something that I think any CEO is going to be able to, really tackle and make a lot of ground on. Twitter, it plays an important part in a lot of our lives. I think it's an awesome service. I enjoy it. I use it. But I can tell you, as someone who's spent and allocated tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising dollars, specifically on social media, I would constantly hear from clients, how do we spend more money on Facebook? I never once in the entire duration of doing this, no one has ever said, how do we spend more money on Twitter? Twitter's always just kind of like hey, we can try a little test, and the results are never that good. It works well for very specific niches, but this goes to a bigger point here. A company can create a lot of value for the people that use the product or service, but it can also capture very little of that value for shareholders. And that's the thing with Twitter. Twitter eats money. It is nowhere near being a dominant player in its category. And up until yesterday, it had a part-time CEO. Will a full-time CEO change anything? I don't think it'll change much, maybe the perception, but in terms of the actual earnings of the business, what the future holds, unfortunately, I don't think a change of CEO is going to make an enormous difference, and it certainly doesn't make me any more interested in owning shares of that company. Now, that's just me personally. This is not financial advice. That's my hot take. Management matters, guys. Who runs the company? It matters. You could have the best strategy in the entire world. You could have the best talent, but if you don't have the right leadership, good luck. There's not a lot of success stories when there's poor leadership, even with everything else in place. This has been Compound Money Quietly, the CMQ Investing Podcast. My name is Chris Franco. Thank you for listening. We'll talk soon.